One of the things that we've referenced a few times in this discussion already is the importance of providing culturally relevant, culturally specific supports, and not just recognizing that it is culturally relevant, not just linguistically accessible for people. So, and there's some impetus for this as well. I'll provide a bit of context before I ask the question. And Minister or Adrian, I'll start with you first. But the context is, we know from the latest report by the Alzheimer Society of Canada, the landmark study, that by 2050, we will see around 5,900 Indigenous peoples living with dementia in BC, which is an increase of 286%. Additionally, 1 out of every 3 people living with dementia here in the province will be of Asian origin. So my question, and I'll start with you first, Adrian, and then I'll go to you, Camille, and then to you, Kieran, is how does your party plan to support people from equity-deserving communities who are living with dementia?
I got the audio off first there. Thank you. Thank you very much for the question. I think we'll maybe take the question separately, because I think our relationship with Indigenous communities is central to what we've tried to do as a government. It's central to reconciliation. When we changed all of the rules around health practitioners with Bill 36, we did an extensive consultation process with other parties, of course, but also with Indigenous peoples. And you see that reflected, their experience of what they are living in the healthcare system reflected in that report. Equally, the In Plain Sight report, which all of the recommendations have been approved and are being pursued across the province, make a difference in seniors' care and in access to healthcare in general. Secondly, we need to make existing institutions more responsive. So a new long-term care home in Kamloops is put in place. It's on Tk'emlúp's land, and it has made a major part of its approach engagement with Indigenous communities in terms of ensuring that Indigenous elders, whether they're in new long-term care homes in Smithers or Kitimat or Kamloops or other communities, are properly dealt with and in control of issues of cultural safety. I think in terms of developing Indigenous primary care, I think if you're going to change the dynamic of primary care for Indigenous people, it can't be the same groups of people who are patients and the same people who are control of the system. You need to put Indigenous people in charge of their own healthcare, and that has been at the core of Indigenous primary care initiatives. So in terms of Indigenous communities, it's building out those supports from the healthcare system and providing supports to communities as they see that as a significant issue in their community. In other communities, which are often in different areas, we need to do some of the same things. Recently, we tripled the size of funding for the Adult Day program in Surrey to a South Asian community groups, the Progressive Intercultural Services Society, because in terms of attracting people to long-term care, it's not just an issue of language, as you say, but of offering food that would be similar to the food that they would expect. And this is as well needed in long-term care homes. There's a floor, for example, at the New Vista in Burnaby that addresses issues in the Korean community, both language, but also other cultural issues. At Lakeview, in my own constituency, there's enormous effort made for the Chinese Canadian community, which represents a majority of people in that community. So at every level, long-term care, home support, in community, we have to build out culturally safe care, and you see the examples of that across the province, and we need to keep building on those by investing in those programs that are based on what communities are asking for, empowering communities, giving communities control over the program so that we can ensure they're culturally safe. And so those are some of the things that we are doing to address that issue of cultural safety, and we need to do in the coming years so that we have those kinds of programs building out everywhere in our province.
Thank you for those comments, Adrian. Go ahead, Camille.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the question. And Minister Dix did do a great job at explaining the importance of ensuring that we are allowing autonomy in Indigenous communities, that we are making sure that we are consulting with them and we are checking in with them and understanding how to do things best. Because the worst approach we could take right now is to enter into these environments and to start telling them how things will happen, how things will be done. And I might go a little on the edge here and be the one to take this opportunity, but I don't feel that all political parties would necessarily have that same approach. So Minister Dix and I are very well aligned on that. And I hope to see, further progress on those fronts of the many things that he has mentioned. I might just take an opportunity to just speak a little bit to the other cultures and needs that were not mentioned by Minister Dix. And that is more on the how do we also incorporate more linguistic resources for communities. And the reason this comes up is just a personal experience. I do have a grandmother that is struggling with Alzheimer's disease right now. And I've witnessed how what Alzheimer's has done to her is it has brought her back to her maternal language, which is French. And for many Canadians and many British Columbians, English is not their first language. And so I think it's important for everyone to understand that piece of what happens with this disease. And that it means that we need to ensure that we're meeting those people where they're at. So we are incredibly grateful because my grandmother gets to live in a care home with staff who speak French and who incorporate French culture into her daily activities. And what that ends up doing for her is it helps ground her. It makes her feel like there is things in this world that make sense when so many things don't right now when she's going through this. And so I could imagine if no one that cared for her spoke any French, she likely would feel very misunderstood, and she would feel like her stress is increasing, her anxiety is increasing, and that would diminish her ability to function. So I just want to share that little piece to add on there so that people really do understand why it is so important for us to have these measures in place to meet people where they're at as Alzheimer's changes them. One last point that I'll make is that we do have a very diverse population in Canada, and I believe that we need to continue taking some very bold steps to act on opportunities we have to incorporate foreign workers and foreign trained medical professionals into our healthcare settings, because they may be the perfect individuals to help provide linguistic and cultural needs that we may be missing. So there are still too many barriers that we're witnessing in place right now that are limiting the speed at which we are permitting these individuals to work in British Columbia. So we will be sure that we are a strong voice and an advocate on ensuring that becomes more expedient.
Thank you, Camille. Appreciate your comments. Over to you, Karen.
I agree very much with what Camille and Adrian have been saying, and it's very important that we work with communities so that they can let us know and work with us in terms of what are those barriers, because we can assume what the barriers are, but we may not know, truly what the barriers are. I think that families, family structure, extended families play a very different role in an Indigenous community or a South Asian community. And so looking at ways where we can actually engage and access and leverage those family connections more is important. But absolutely working with communities to make those the recognitions. And I also just want to say, I'm reading the comments as they're coming up here and just listening to Camille and Adrian. I'm finding this is a very educational conversation for me. And I just want to thank you for allowing me to take that knowledge away.